her husband owned it, but her brother Terry Smith Corporal Terry Smith served in Vietnam. Served very honorably and lost his life. There was a story told about Terry that he was awarded in a very big way with many awards during his time in service. But some of his effects were destroyed before they were returned to his family. So after the war, one of his buddies from the service came to see the family, and then, as many Gold Star families will do, they'll have kind of a memorial in their house to their loved one that was lost in the battle. And he came in and he says, "Where's Terry's?" And it was a certain medal that was not on display. And they're like, "Well, we didn't know he had that one." Well, yes, he had that one, but it was destroyed, and so they were going to do a ceremony to get that reissued to Terry. So they went to one of the bases. It was a big ceremony. It was a very big deal. And Donna says that they made the award, and as they were walking out across the parking lot going home, have you ever seen the little wind dirt devils that come flying around, look like the little tornadoes? One of those comes popping up, and it gets a hold of the paper that's in her mother's hand, and it flies off, and it completely disappears. They could not find it. She says it was almost as if Terry was coming down going, "About time, about time." And I love to tell that story because this ceremony that happens here and what's going on with our memorial that King Gamble, love you, brother, sitting here. And he's not my physical brother. Everybody's asking, I didn't know you were Ken's sister. Well, in Jesus Christ, he's my brother, but that's another story. But this memorial and what's been going on here to our soldiers, our honored soldiers that came back to just an abysmal welcoming, and those that came back injured because of what Agent Orange did to them, about time. So if I come and do this next year, you're going to hear that story again, but about time that we got this done. So I welcome you, and at this time I'd like to invite Joe Eden to come up and give us our invocation. Joe, come on. Another brother. Why don't we all stand, because after the invocation we're going to have Pledge of Allegiance from Terry Wilson, and we'll just stand for all of that. And I'll tell you this right now, we're not going to be presenting the colors because we're at half-staff. And to present the colors during half-staff it just doesn't work. So because of the tragedy in Nashville at the Covenant School, we are foregoing that because we're at half-staff out of respect for those families and those that were lost. So that is the reason we're not presenting the colors. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. For those who uncover, please. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We humbly come before you to honor the spirits of those men and women lost their life to Agent Orange exposure, and to those who still battle the effects of it. We ask your blessing on this memorial and what it stands for. Father, we ask your blessing on all Vietnam veterans, their families who have suffered and continue to suffer. Father, we ask your blessing on Ken Gamble and the Agent Orange Foundation for the work they have done and the work they continue to do. Father, we ask your blessing on the Springfield Memorial Gardens and the management team for making this vision to honor our generation. We ask you to lead and guide and direct us in everything that we do. Father, we ask you that you would protect and keep safe all of those who will be traveling back to their homes after this ceremony. In Jesus' name we pray all of these things, and all God's children says, Amen. Amen. Terry Wilson.
Okay, everybody face the colors and salute. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Got to get that Marine grunt in there, man. I'm telling you. All right. Okay, and at this time, we have got the East Robertson High School Band, and they are going to present the different branches anthem. So when you hear yours, and you're part, if you're part of the Army and they're doing yours, you stand up, you know how that works. So I'm going to hand it over to them, and we're going to let the band take it over. Robertson High School Band. At this time, we want to stand and have our national anthem with Jesse G. Jesse, are you here? Oh, here you are.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets regular, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, see, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Jesse. God bless you. That's beautiful. All right, at this time, I'm going to turn the program over to Sergeant Holland, our ROTC director leader. I'm not sure what his title is, but he's doing a good job. Here you go.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like everyone, if you would, for a moment, please, silence and/or turn off your cell phones for the remainder of the ceremony, out of respect and reverence for those that we're going to honor right now. Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the center of our gathering. You may have noticed the table set before you. It is filled with symbolism, and I will explain it. This table is set for our prisoners of war and those missing in action from all wars. They are not with us today. Their chairs are empty but saved for their hoped return. Let us remember their absence. Let us remember the United States Air Force, honored by Cadet Shannon Cassidy. Let us remember the United States Army, honored by Cadet William Parrish. Let us remember the United States Navy, honored by Cadet Angelina Bailey. And let us remember the United States Marine Corps, honored by Cadet Denver Shute. Let us remember the men and women prisoners of war from all branches of service that are often, or that are too often forgotten. Let us remember them. The tablecloth is white, symbolizing the purity of their intentions to respond to their country's call to arms, so that their children could remain free. Remember. The lone candle symbolizes the frailty of a prisoner alone, trying to stand up against their oppressor. Remember. The black ribbon on the candle reminds us of those who will not be coming home. Remember. The single rose reminds us of the loved ones and families of our comrades in arms who keep the faith and await their return. Remember. A slice of lemon is on the bread plate to remind us of their bitter fate if we do not bring them home. Remember. There is salt on the plate, symbolic of the family's tears as they wait and remember. The glass is inverted. They cannot toast with us today, maybe tomorrow, if we remember. The red, white, and blue ribbon is tied to the flower vase by a yellow ribbon that was worn by thousands who awaited their return. Remember. The faded picture on the table is a reminder that they are missed very much and are remembered by their families. Remember. As we look upon this empty table, do not remember ghosts from the past, but remember our comrades. Remember those whom we depended on in battle. They depend on us to bring them home. Remember our friends. They are the ones we loved, those who love life and freedom as we do. They will remember what we do, so please honor and remember them.
Thank you. So moving. I love to see these students participate. And thank you so much, Sergeant Holland, for the work that you do, and for all the students that are here that are learning something about this history. And with that said, Steve Williams is here. Again, Steve Williams is here with Operation Song. Why don't you tell them a little bit about Operation Song before you begin, and then he's got a song to share with us. Would you do that for us?
Oh, yes. Bob Reagan, great musician, songwriter, did a tour overseas years ago, and went on to military bases and met these soldiers that had these amazing stories. And he had the idea, he said, no one tells stories like songwriters, and no one has better stories than the soldiers. And so he had this idea to pair them together, and he started this organization, Operation Song. We write with military veterans and help them turn their stories into songs. And this first song I'm going to do was written with Terry Gould from the, we call it the alumni class in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Since the deadly clouds fell from the sky, more than 50 years have passed us by. But no blood or shots fired from the ground, the great soldier 6 feet under the ground. He came down in a misty scourge, a killer they called Agent Orange. It took out birds, plants, and trees, but it left its seed inside of me. They said, don't believe everything you hear about the toxin, dioxin, have no fear. Wrapped up neatly like the perfect lie. That's why today I'm still wrapped up in the fight. It rained down on the men below who never got medals 'cause it didn't show. Rivers and creeks were full of it. Just the thought even makes me sick. He said, don't believe everything you hear about the toxin, dioxin, have no fear. Wrapped up neatly like the perfect lie. That's why today I'm still wrapped up in the fight. More than 50 years have passed us by since the deadly clouds fell from the sky. Yeah, I'm proud to be an old war vet. I was killed and now I just haven't died yet.
Thank you so much. We're going to hear from him again in just a little bit, but we've got some things we've got to get on to. We're going to get on with some more of the problem, but thank you, Steve, so much. Before we move on to our keynote speaker, Mayor Vogel, get on up here, please. This is our county mayor, Billy Vogel, another one of my brothers. And where's my sister, Mayor Williams, not Schneider? Get up here. We're going to have you both come up here real quick. Mayor Vogel's got something to take care of, and I think you need to be up here with him. So she's the newlywed. That's why we keep calling her Mayor Schneider. But anyway, she's our city manager. He is our county manager. So I'm going to hand it off.
Yeah, I'd like to apologize for being late. I was in a very important meeting in Clarksville this morning to try to keep our trash prices down to the citizens. And it's very important, but this here is a lot more important. I broke a few laws to get here right now. And thank goodness somebody ahead of me was breaking the law, because Robertson County's finest had him pulled over. So I was able to get by. But let me say that you people are the nation's finest. I can't imagine the things that you saw and did and living with it in your dreams at night now. I'm going to ask Mayor Williams. She said she's going to use Mayor Williams, and I said, well, who's Mayor Williams? I'm going to use Mayor Snyder to please read this proclamation that I've got. If she gets down to the last sentence, I'll take over. Will you please do that for me, Mayor? The dog stores are $2.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here, and thank you for your service, each and every one of you. Whereas the Vietnam War fought from 1964 to 1975, finally ended March 29, 1973, with the Military Assistance Command Vietnam was disbanded and the last U.S. combat troops departed the Republic of Vietnam. And whereas with 9,087,000 served August 5, 1964 to May 7, 1975, with 3,403,000 in VA were approximately 2.7 million United States military members deployed to Vietnam, more than 153,000 wounded, over 58,000 lost their lives, including 14 from Robertson County, and 238 medals of honor awarded, whereas 7,484 women served in Vietnam, 6,250 were nurses, and whereas 766 prisoners of war were taken in Vietnam and 114 died in captivity. 1,500 are still missing in action, with 21 Tennesseans accounted for, 26 still unaccounted for. Whereas a black wall stands in our nation's capital, the brave Americans who gave all to serve their county and their country in an unpopular war, with names still being added. And whereas a monument now stands in Robertson County, Tennessee, memorializing the brave Americans who served and those who returned with the unnoticed, silent, unseen injuries. And whereas the state of Tennessee passed legislation in 2008 to proclaim March 29th as Vietnam Veterans Day, to be the first state to honor Vietnam veterans in such a way.
Thank you, Mayor. Now, therefore, I, William A. Vogel, Robertson County, Tennessee, do hereby proclaim March 29, 2023 as Vietnam Veterans Day. In Robertson County, I encourage all citizens to join with me in this worthy observance. Thank you, it's an honor. It's been worth it if I got 20 tickets. Thank y'all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Vogel. Thank you, Mayor Williams. God bless y'all so much. And as we continue on, we've got more business to take care of, but we won't introduce my keynote speaker, our keynote speaker today. Major General Tommy Baker, where are you, sir? Major General, come on up here. While he's headed up here, let me just tell you a little bit about him. Major General Tommy Baker is the commissioner for the Tennessee Department of Veterans Services, and he has served as the commissioner since 2020. General Baker retired from the Tennessee National Guard with 41 years of service as the deputy commander to the adjutant general. Thank you, sir, for your service. You can read all about him in the brochure that they handed you, the program. But now we're all about proclamations now. I think you've got one too before we get on with your speech. I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Luke U-turn. It's so great to be in Robeson County today. Again, I think this is the third one of these I've got to attend. So appreciative of the community support here. It's so good to see all of you here to support our Vietnam veterans and honor this day. I think, Mr. Kim Gamble, sir, would you come up? I have a proclamation from the governor I want to present to you today. He's making his way up here. He's in high gear. All right, so this is in fine print, so I'm going to have to use my readers on this one. All right, the state of Tennessee proclamation by the governor. Whereas this marks the 48th anniversary of the end of American involvement in the Vietnam War, and whereas over 58,000 of the more than 3 million men and women who served in the Vietnam War made the ultimate sacrifice, 1,295 of whom were Tennesseans, and whereas many who served in the Vietnam War are still missing, their family members, friends, and fellow veterans continue to experience this uncertainty, and whereas, as Americans and Tennesseans, we will always honor the legacy of those who served our country, were wounded, or lost their lives in battle, and we can never repay our debt of gratitude for the courage they demonstrated. Whereas in 2008, the state of Tennessee enacted legislation to designate March 29th as Vietnam Veterans Day to honor those who served our country during this 20-year-long conflict. And whereas Tennessee is proud to be called home by more than 160,000 Vietnam veterans, and whereas Vietnam War Veterans Day is an opportunity to honor all Vietnam veterans and their families, recognizing the valuable contributions they continue to make through leadership and wisdom. Now, therefore, I, Bill Lee, Governor of the state of Tennessee, do hereby proclaim March 29th, 2022 as Vietnam War Veterans Day in the state of Tennessee and encourage all citizens to join me in this worthy observance. Signed, Governor Bill Lee. Mr. Gamble, on behalf of all the work you did to establish the Orange Heart Foundation and bring that needed recognition to you and all your warrior generation, sir, I want to present you this on behalf of Governor Bill Lee. All right, I thought I could get him to give the keynote speech, but he backed out on me. So go right ahead, Laverne said. All right, so I'm going to try to stay on my notes here and turn the page and keep this microphone here. If it don't work out, I'll go off script, but that should worry you very much if I go off script. But anyway, thank you again for coming today. Today, March 29th, is a day designated by law, the day that U.S. troops officially left South Vietnam, ending our country's direct involvement in 1973. There are many effects that the Vietnam War has had on our society, and one of those is the work of Mr. Kim Gamble and many other heroes whose tireless efforts made the Orange Heart Foundation a reality. Our Vietnam veterans not only fought a determined enemy, but were exposed to 20 million gallons of dioxin, aka Agent Orange, that was sprayed on them and in their area of operations. The price of that exposure still lingers today as many of our Vietnam veterans continue to battle the after effects. More than 3.4 million service members served between November 1st, 1955 and May 15th, 1975. The war came at a cost of over 58,000 lives. Nearly 1,300 were Tennesseans and left more than 158,000 wounded. For further perspective, 350,000 Purple Hearts were awarded to Vietnam service members, compared to 36,000 to our brave OIF veterans. In our nation, we now have just over 6 million living Vietnam veterans, over 140,000 here in the state of Tennessee. We lose about 600 Vietnam veterans every day in our nation, many of them residing in long-term care health facilities. We fully recognize today that these brave warriors did not receive the honor befitting the heroes they are. But we're here today to say again, thank you for your service, your sacrifice, and welcome home. And by the way, if you hadn't seen the mobile wall that heals, you need to make that one of your priorities. On that wall, there's 58,281 names of those who did not come back. There was 246 casualties, was the largest day of casualties. The youngest only being 15 years old, the oldest 62. Their average age was under 23 years of age. 1968 was the deadliest year. Over 160 Medal of Honor winners, 16 chaplains gave their life, 3 sets of fathers and sons, 42 sets of brothers, and 8 female nurses. Over 1,500 names of service members are still on that wall that are unaccounted for. We need to all pray for their families, that they are comforted and that someday they will have complete closure. There's been over 400,000 items of memorials left at that wall in memory of their friends and those who did not come back. Our Vietnam veterans that served were not in search of fame or glory. The vast majority of them did not come from wealth or societal influence, but yet they served and became the warriors of their generations. Those warriors are among us today, many of them. I see your hats. I see the T-shirts. I see the pride that you still carry. Reminds me of folks I've met in the past few years in this position. Mr. Bill Robinson, who now lives up in East Tennessee. Bill was the longest held enlisted POW in U.S. history, from 1965 until 1973. During his first 5 years of captivity, he got 2 meals a day and 15 minutes outside. I met him a couple of years ago at the Wall That Heals. I got to hear him tell his incredible story and remind us all of how to be resilient in the face of tremendous adversity and to never lose hope, and how we can return to the nation and be a voice of encouragement to all who have ever served or all who ever will serve for years to come. I think about men like Colonel Retired James C. Harding, another Vietnam veteran who now resides in my home, Carroll County, and who remains the 25th most decorated American service member in our military history. A pilot that flew nearly 600 combat missions, earned an Air Force Cross in a 3-day search and rescue mission in 1972. He had 3 Silver Stars, 2 Legions of Merits, 4 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars with V devices, and 9 Distinguished Flying Crosses. I got to interview Colonel Harding about a year and a half ago. What an interesting, compelling story he tells about his experiences in 2 tours in Vietnam. But yet, he's just a humble servant. He said, I was just doing my job. I think Lieutenant General Donnie Walker's comments most accurately describe my thoughts about our Vietnam warriors. And I quote General Walker, Vietnam veterans built the foundation of today's military. In fact, 11 of the last 13 chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staffs were Vietnam veterans. And I will tell you, there's not a general officer or a command sergeant major in today's Army who doesn't point to a Vietnam-era veteran as their mentor and role model. I know that is definitely how I feel as a young man entering the Tennessee Army National Guard in 1980. I walked through the halls of that armory, and I began to see men in olive drab uniforms who had shoulders patches on their right arm. I didn't fully understand what that meant, but it didn't take long to figure out These were the folks who had served and had come back and had decided to continue to serve in our reserve component. They were our leaders and mentors. And I remember saying on many firing ranges, many field exercises, and talking to them about their experiences and talking to them about what combat was really like. They never once failed to give me good advice and share the wisdom of the years of hardship they had endured so that my generation could benefit from it. I'm so thankful that I had those folks in my life. So whether you served in the 101st, the 20th Engineer Brigade, the 18th Military Brigade, the 25th Tropical Lightning, the Marical Division, wherever you served, whenever you served there, thank you for your service. Whether it was at Pleiku, Idring Valley, Quezon, or Hamburger Hill, the rest of us have benefited from your experience and your mentorship, and we can never say thank you enough. Thank you. God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Major General Tommy Baker. And at this time, we're going to bring up our next speaker. And she is one of our authors that you can meet here. Her name is Thon Young Boyer. Thon, come on up. Thon is the author of Ground Kaiser. She spent 12 years of her life in Vietnam. Her parents made the great sacrifice to escape communism and eventually arrived in the United States. I'm going to point you to the program to hear the rest of her story, but she has some remarks for us.
Well, hey, y'all. I am from southern Vietnam. My name is Ton Boyer, and I know that Ton isn't a very common name around here. But in Vietnam, it's very common. I've also been called a ground kisser. Why a ground kisser? A ground kisser is an immigrant that come into this country and so appreciative of being here that when they get here, they kiss the ground. I want to thank Ken Gamble and the foundation for having me here today. I'm very humble and honored to be a part of this program. I do know a little bit about Agent Orange. I grew up on the Mekong River of Vietnam, and 2 members of my family and I have a brain tumor. And, I don't know if that's coincidences or not, but I think it does have something to do with Agent Orange. In all of human history, there is an example of a noble idea that it stands above the rest. It is this country. When people protest for their rights in Chile or China, they're keeping the fire that was sparked here in Philadelphia a long time ago. The reason for people to bother to defend their freedom at all in places like Venezuela or Taiwan is because they have the audacity to believe that it is possible. It is because of our country, the United States of America. There are many great places, don't get me wrong, there are many great places to live in the world. But the reason they exist at all is because of the movement that started here. Our flag isn't just a flag that represents the United States. This flag represents hope. It represents personal freedom for everyone. And liberty is the yearning of every heart. And this is the birthplace. So when communists took over my country of Vietnam, we decided to escape. We knew that America was not the bad guys that we have been told. America, the communists call it the American War. America was our dream to come to. So I was born in Vietnam. during the invasions of the North Vietnam, Communist North. When the war ended, I was 8 years old. I grew up from a fairly wealthy family. My grandfather built several businesses on the Mekong Delta, and all of the family worked in my grandfather's business, including me as a little kid. When Saigon fell in 1975 to the communists, overnight, at a stroke of a pen, the communists, nationalized all our banks and businesses. You know what? To make everyone equal. Sounds really great, right? It worked. The rich got poorer and the poor stayed poor. We even had a communist moved in and lived with us. The communists took several of our businesses, our land, our home. They allowed us to keep our bakery, and with that, they even tell us how much to produce and the pricing of baked goods. So things in Vietnam got really, really bad. We eventually escaped all the madness in Vietnam one night to the South China Sea, trying to get to Australia. But of course, we were hoping to be picked up by an American ship. Everyone wants to be here, come to this land of milk and honey. Well, we didn't make it to Australia. We didn't get picked up by an American ship. We, however, was robbed by pirates. They left us to die of starvation. We battled a huge storm. We were stranded on a deserted island in Indonesia with other refugees. Lived off the grids for several months. We almost died of starvation and dysentery until someone found us and rescued us. I eventually ended up in the U.S. after 14 really hard ships on this island. I really came to this country and really appreciate the freedom that was fought for me by our veterans, especially the Vietnam veterans. You hold a special place in my heart. Please indulge me for a second. Vietnam veterans, would you please stand up? You left your home, you left your family and your country to fight for me, my family, and my country. Because you believe that everyone deserves to be free. You didn't get the homecoming you deserve. Some of you came home to a divided country. You had food thrown at you. You were spit on, accused you of being murderers, asked you to never speak of your time in Vietnam. You carried this guilt, this burden with you far too long. I want you to know this. Never believe that the lie that the Vietnam War didn't matter, that you fought for nothing. Know what you did helped me, helped my family, my city, and my country. You made a difference. And how do I know you made a difference? When you left Vietnam, we had no one to fight for us. The enemy got what they wanted, and they took our freedom. There are millions of Vietnamese who live in freedom, and they are so grateful to you and your sacrifice, your courage, and your bravery. Thank you for all of the sacrifices that you have made for me. I am so blessed to have you on my side. I am grateful to live in this amazing country of ours. I dedicated my book, The Ground Kisser, to my Lord Jesus Christ with gratitude to the U.S. military, especially you, my heroes who served in Vietnam. I am so sorry that it took this long for you to hear thank you from the other side. Thank you for all you did to fight for my freedom. Welcome home.
Wow, I think I want to read her book. Ton, that was amazing. Thank you so much. We have Kaylin Bruner-Tran is coming up now. Kaylin is an active medical research scientist at Vanderbilt University. Her research examines the effects of the exposure to dioxin, the chemical contaminant present in Agent Orange. She is a brilliant writer. Come on up.
Good afternoon. It is truly an honor to be here. As she said, my name is Kaylin Bruner-Tran. I am a scientist. I work at Vanderbilt University just south of here in Nashville. And my research focuses on reproductive pathology. And pathology is just the study of disease. And of course, I'm interested in diseases that affect reproduction. My long-term, like 20, 30-year colleague, Kevin Osteen, wanted to be here today, but a family emergency has kept him from us. But his heart is here with us. And he is a reproductive endocrinologist, and that means he studies the hormones that impact reproduction. Even though Kevin is not here, another member of our team is here, Paula Austin. She's an amazing person that I love dearly, and like some of you, she is U.S. Marine Corps retired. Over the years, our research has expanded and now includes reproductive toxicology. And toxicology, as I'm sure you know, is the study of how chemical exposures impact our lives. And we're particularly interested in how those impact reproduction. As a scientist, our goal is to make a positive difference in the world. And I truly believe that as a group, scientists are dedicated to doing good. But there's no denying that there can be unintended consequences of research conducted with the best of intentions. In 1941, during the early days of World War II, there were 4 groups of scientists, 2 in the United States and 2 in Great Britain, and they were tasked with finding herbicides that would boost food production by killing all the weeds. Over the course of those studies, one of the men realized that their work might have military value, and he approached both governments, the U.S. and British governments, and said, hey, I think if we find these compounds, maybe we could make a chemical cocktail that'll just kill everything. And wouldn't that be a great thing? And the governments agreed. And over the course of several years, all 4 groups identified the same 2 compounds that they said, when used at high dose and in combination, would kill all the foliage and not just the unwanted weeds. World War II ended before that compound could be used against the Japanese, which was the original intent. But less than 2 decades later, that combination would be tapped for use in Vietnam. And because it was sent to Vietnam in a black barrel with an orange stripe, it quickly became nicknamed Agent Orange. I never met the men responsible for the development of Agent Orange, but I'm confident that their intent was to do good. They were doing their part to make sure the Allies won the war. It was a noble goal. However, at least one of those scientists, Dr. Arthur Galston, was horrified at what he saw happening in Vietnam, and he publicly warned that the damage being done might be irreparable. And now I would like to speak directly to our Vietnam veterans. In 1879, General William Sherman famously said, "War is hell." But you know that because you were there and you lived it. But what happened when you came home? I know that the memories remain, the pain of loss or the guilt of being a survivor. These are the mental scars of battle that every soldier from the beginning of time to the end of time must bear. And you knew that going in. Each of you was willing to risk your life and bear the scars of battle that you knew would happen. And I, for one, am grateful to you for your courage and your sacrifice. But despite your willingness to sacrifice yourselves, none of you agreed to sacrifice the life or the health of your child or that of your grandchild. You knew you might not come home, but you had no way of knowing that you might bring something with you that could reach far into the future and continue to cause death and destruction. And of course, I am speaking of Agent Orange, a chemical cocktail designed to destroy enemy foliage and food crops. And it did. You were told that it was harmless to humans, but it was not. The reason Agent Orange was not harmless was because it contained a chemical called dioxin. Dioxin is one of the most toxic compounds known to man. It has no commercial value, and it was not supposed to be present in Agent Orange. It was a flaw in the manufacturing process. Millions of gallons of Agent Orange were spread across South Vietnam during the war. It exposed an untold number of Vietnamese soldiers and civilians, and of course, millions of Western servicemen and women sent to fight on their behalf. Unfortunately, just as Dr. Galston predicted, the damage did not end once the spraying stopped. Most American soldiers in Vietnam were between the ages of 17 and 25. The average age was only 19. At 19, most men are still growing. The human brain does not fully mature until the age of 25. The reason this is important is that the younger you are, the more sensitive you are to dioxin. When you're growing and developing is when dioxin does the most damage. And of course, sperm cells are always growing and developing in healthy men, regardless of their age. Sperm cells are exquisitely sensitive to dioxin and thus to Agent Orange. It's been nearly 80 years since the botanists discovered the chemicals that we call Agent Orange. And now I stand before you today, another scientist trying to do good. Can I undo what those men did? I cannot. I cannot change the past. I cannot change the fact that you were exposed, and I cannot change the damage it may have done to your health. But I want you to know two things. First, the research that Kevin and I have done over 20 years or so has confirmed what many of you already know. The exposure you experience to Agent Orange can and does affect your children and at least 2 generations thereafter. But maybe, just maybe, it doesn't have to. And that's the second thing I want you to know. The research that we have conducted, and let me be clear, we do this work in mice because who in their right mind would expose people to high doses of dioxin on purpose? Our research has shown that the damage caused by Agent Orange does not have to be transmitted to the next generation. There is a way to break the cycle. Our studies have found that dioxin impairs fertility and increases the risk of preterm birth, pregnancy loss, and conditions associated with preterm birth, including babies that are born too small or develop life-threatening diseases of the lung and intestine. We have shown that all of these disorders can be passed down not only from a mother exposed to dioxin, but also from a father exposed. I know the VA only recognizes spina bifida as being a consequence of paternal exposures, but Kevin and I believe that is only the tip of the spear. We are reproductive biologists, and that is our focus. We do not study cancer or many of the diseases you may be interested in. However, we and others have demonstrated, absolutely demonstrated, that much of our adult health is rooted in the fetal environment and in the health of the parents prior to conception. Few people appreciate the important role of the placenta during pregnancy, and even fewer people understand the important contribution the father makes to the health of that placenta. If the sperm is not healthy, the placenta is not healthy, the pregnancy is compromised, and the child's health will be compromised. However, our studies in mice have shown that we can repair the damage done to sperm by dioxin. When the sperm is healthy, the placenta is healthy, the pregnancy is healthy, and the child is healthy. And guess what? The grandchild is healthy. Can our approach work in humans? I believe that it can, and that work will be done by others in our field. I know that we are far too late to help our veterans that served so honorably in Vietnam, but I want you to know you are not forgotten, and we will not let Agent Orange be your legacy. Thank you.
And I want to say that Kaylin is an author as well and writes brilliantly and weaves all of her expertise into her novels, and you can see her. And I've got Susan coming up now as well. Susan Hunter, come on up here. Gotten to know Susan a bit. She's the author of 77 Letters, and if you have not discovered this book, these are letters written, come on up here, sweetheart, between her mom and one of the soldiers through the Operation Morale Booster. It's an amazing true story. It's the reason my students are here is because we've been reading excerpts to them during our homeroom class. So, Susan, let me...
Well, thank you for that introduction, and thank you, Ken, for inviting me here and giving me this honor. If I wasn't so steeped in my faith, I'd say this is unbelievable, that I'd be up here giving you honor on such a meaningful day. Some people search for a mission. This mission, searched for me, and I'm so glad it did. You don't have to spend more than 5 minutes with me to realize that Vietnam veterans reside in my heart. These last 3 years have been extraordinary, from finding hundreds of letters from the war in my mom's attic to publishing this book, adapting it to stage, performing it to 2 sold-out performances, and now producing a documentary series on all perspectives of the Vietnam War. It is safe to say, with every breath I take, I give glory to my Lord and Savior, and I salute our Vietnam veterans. When a group of individuals collectively epitomize something remarkable, we love to put a label on them. One of my favorite uses of this labeling is initiated by news anchor and author Tom Brokaw, referring to those of the World War II era as the greatest generation. Akin to the reasoning behind him coining this title to those born between 1901 and 1927, in my book, and now in my travels, I've taken the liberty to refer to our Vietnam veterans as the bravest generation. And for good reason. Spawning from the impact of my book, 77 Letters, a story of my mother's writing campaign during the war, I have had the good fortune of spending the better part of the last 2 years traveling the country, interviewing men and women who intimately lived the Vietnam War. In doing so, I have garnered a deep understanding as to why many of you, are deserving of such a title. Now, bear with me. I'm going to indulge a little bit because I think in a group this size, there might be some that might not be aware of all that I'm about to detail. The average age of a World War II soldier was 25. For Vietnam, as you just heard, it was 19. These recent high school graduates made up more than half of the 2.9 million deployed to Vietnam and engaged in the most barbaric war of our time. They were led into battles by superiors, often just a year or two older. These superiors were weighted with the task of plotting and executing dangerous operations with units of young and inexperienced combat soldiers. These greenies were handed a loaded M16 and told to go out into the bush and hunt down the phantom-like enemy, yet weren't legally allowed to drink a beer at home. For the duration of their tour, they exhaled every breath in high alert, as each step could have proven to be their last in a land riddled with grotesque lethal booby traps. At times, ground troops were called upon to remain in the jungle overnight, an RON, which presented itself with a whole slew of other dangers. There was the 2-step poisonous snake, named for the distance traveled before meeting your maker after being bitten by the slithering assailant. These kept many from sleeping. And this endgame paled in comparison to coming face to face with a Bengal tiger, and some did. The best our men could do on these RONs was to lay on the ground, cover themselves in loose vegetation, and pray to the high heavens they'd live to see another sunrise. Images of horror were seared into their impressionable minds, giving them a distorted view of right and wrong, an internal conflict no one should ever be forced to experience, especially not at such young ages. Our young men were also flying fighter jets from aircraft carriers, commanding ships, and executing aerial refueling operations. Unique to the Vietnam War were our helicopter pilots. This bird and these men may be the most revered as the hallmark of the war. They finessed the hovering aircraft, dropping units into close-range enemy territory, swooping in on rescue missions, completing medevac missions of our wounded and our KIAs, and heroically diverting attention away from our ground operations, sometimes making the ultimate sacrifice doing so. For these reasons, nothing touches the heart of a Vietnam veteran like the sound of a Huey. No news to you all, this war was unlike anything our ancestors had fought or our history books had prepared us for. Vietnam was on the opposite side of the globe. The terrain and weather were two non-personified enemies our military was up against. As a result of hundreds of years of foreign domination, Vietnam nationalists had dug themselves a tunnel system hundreds of miles long, rivaling any in the world. The natives knew the layout of the tunnels and used it to their advantage, giving them an upper hand in successfully ambushing our ground troops. These tunnels turned even uglier in a split second with monsoon rains, entrapping our soldiers who were called upon to descend into the depths of the tunnel, searching for the enemy. The natives also had years of preparing booby traps, hidden just below the surface or behind every leaf, or behind a leaf. Not one step could be taken for granted. The thick vegetation underneath the waterways naturally entangled the boots on the ground and slowed their movement. The weather was also an obstacle, hard to prepare for, being from a more moderate part of the world. On one end of their tour, the temperatures were relentlessly stabilized at 120 degrees, and at the other end, drenched by months of monsoons. Living outside during monsoon season and traipsing through the waterways in their boots often led to foot rot, a debilitating condition. And the leeches and the insects, I'm not even going to go there. Then there's the element of definitively identifying the enemy. The men, women, and children working with them in the rice paddies during the day often were on the offensive end of a weapon come nighttime. They had 4 organized enemy forces to contend with, all possessing different characteristics and strengths. The North Vietnamese Army, the People's Army of Vietnam, the guerrilla warriors of the Viet Cong, and the Chinese Communist Army. Making a concerted effort to steer clear of dipping into the politics behind this war, which it was drenched in, suffice to say, it was arguably the most complicated and controversial war in our country's history. Who had zero responsibility, yet paid the full price? Our soldiers and their families. Those returning from war had been demonized in a most reprehensible manner. Propagated by the media, public opinion had long turned against the war itself, yet many in the public couldn't make that distinction between the evils of the war fueled by politics and those young men and women, whether enlisted or drafted, had taken an oath to serve the sitting commander-in-chief. These same young men and women who were shipped off to Vietnam months earlier returned to an ungrateful nation in both words and actions. They were all too often spat on and assaulted, both verbally and physically, and were kept from obtaining jobs. It was one thing to enter a combat zone and expect violence, quite another to return home from a horrific tour of duty and be on the receiving end of unthinkable rhetoric and violence. Their transition back to civilian life consisted of the time it took to walk off the plane and out the door of the airport. Many were ordered to toss their uniforms in the men's room trash barrel and exit the airport in civilian clothes, and try not to look like a soldier out there. It was also suggested that they leave their time in country off their resume, as it would inevitably keep them from job opportunities. As far as their friends, they didn't ask, And if they did, they didn't believe, and instead called them liars. This further isolated those who most needed to open up to process all that they had endured. I'd be remiss if I failed to applaud the heroic and brave efforts of the 11,000 women who served with valor and dedication. Most, as nurses, we had the in-country, essentially performing triage. In nearby Japan, they were treating our soldiers and then determining whether to send them back to duty or send them home. And then those nurses who were stateside, who helped the young men and their families adjust to their new life post-war body. Other women served in Vietnam in civilian roles, such as Bobby the Weather Girl on local TV or the Donut Dollies. An even more obscure role, but not to be overlooked, were the brave and beautiful stewardesses who dared to take flights into the war zone. Aside from the danger, they stomached the conversations on the way into Vietnam and the heartbreaks of noticing many not returning on the flights home. Collectively, these women provided the shoulders of which today's women in uniform are standing upon. The war was not over for many, even when they came home. There was an enemy lurking that would surface years later, draped in orange, but made up of many colors. This battle continues today, and men like Ken Gamble have valiantly and compassionately led the charge combating this impervious enemy. On this day, there are ceremonies around the country honoring those who served during this 20 years of war, 1955 to 1975. This recognition makes no distinction between those who served in-country fighting, in theater as support, or elsewhere on other assignments, as they were all called to serve, and none could self-determine where they served. Their fight was not left behind in Vietnam, and many who never saw Vietnam joined their comrades and took up arms in the stateside battle for respect. Our Vietnam veterans have organized rally points for greeting our returning combat soldiers from all wars since, as they return to U.S. soil. For those who return in honor under the flag, their funerals have been protected from misguided protesters with the establishment of Rolling Thunder in 1988, a band of motorcyclists who guard the sanctity and honor of interment of those who wore the uniform. The grit of the bravest generation is unparalleled. Their arduous fight on Capitol Hill for recognition of the government's use of Agent Orange and other dioxins during the war in Vietnam has paved the way to protecting and compensating our younger veterans who have been exposed to the chemicals in the infamous burn pits. Even in their 70s, there is no rest for the weary. Their bravery has yet to fade. Now, more than 50 years post-war for many, having been shamed into silence for years, for decades, they are once again finding the courage to share their experiences before their efforts and the lessons to be learned from them are gone forever. Personally, being welcomed to interview so many is a gift I don't take lightly. To be trusted by this most extraordinary and guarded community of veterans is an honor that will never be topped for me. In 1966, most of our deploying young soldiers didn't even know where Vietnam was located on a map, yet today, at the mention of their first impression of Vietnam, they can still hear the whopping of the Huey, feel that oppressive wall of heat as they exited the aircraft, and smell the stench from the burning chemicals, all like it was yesterday. If there is a message I get across today, let it be this. For the veterans, please share your stories. Our nation has learned so much on the backs of you all, but there's still so much more to be learned. For all others, if you have the opportunity to talk with a Vietnam veteran, seize it and cherish it. I am confident your life will be enhanced having done so. And in doing so, you will be revealing heroes and restoring honor to the bravest generation. In closing, to the bravest generation, I salute you all with every fiber of my being. May God bless every one of you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. And I can't say enough about go and see these ladies, these authors. They're amazing, amazing works. And at this time, we're going to get to hear from Steve again. Steve Williams, take it.
Thank you. I set out to write a song with some Vietnam vets at the VA in Murfreesboro a few years ago. And there were 6 of them sitting around a table, and they started talking about the wall in Washington, D.C. And one of the soldiers said, "Oh, I could never go there. It terrifies me." And I thought about it for a moment, and I said, "Well, you built up your own wall that you need to climb to get over that." And this is the song we wrote that day. There's a place in D.C. I've always wanted to see, but it terrifies me. At the National Mall, for the ones who gave all, they dedicated a wall. But it's not as big as this wall of mine, the one I've been counting on. To hold back the tears a grown man can cry. I built it tall, I built it wide. If I could reach a little higher, stand a little stronger, put out this fire, not hold out any longer. Change my mind, it's time to climb the wall outside. Oh, it's a never-ending train, 58,000 names, they're like links in a chain. You know, some people swear you could be standing there and hear voices in the air. But I made a vow the other night, God knows why it took so long. I'll be up and gone at the break of dawn. I'm traveling light, it's a 2-hour flight. Gonna reach a little higher, stand a little strong. Put out this fire, not hold out any longer. Change my mind, it's mine, time to climb. Leave these fears behind and reach a little higher. Stand a little stronger. Put out this fire, not hold out any longer. Change my mind, it's time to climb the wall outside. The wall outside. The wall.
Steve Williams with Operation Song. We'll hear from him once more, but I can't check him out and all that they're doing with Operation Song. It is amazing. At this time, Joyce, come on up here. Joyce Gentry is going to join me. I want to say something about this Gold Star Memorial that's in front of me. She's a Gold Star bride. She's a Gold Star wife because she lost her precious husband to the effects of Agent Orange, and they have approved making those who have fallen that came home injured part of the Gold Star community. Gold Star is a family that lost a loved one because of a battle. And that is such an honor, and we're so proud of the work that you do. And we're going to now officially unveil the new cenotaph, and we're going to be reading the names. Joyce is going to start it. If you're one of our volunteers reading a list of names, she's number 1. I asked number 2 to get on deck. and be ready, and we're just going to take our place in line. So you're numbered. If you're a volunteer and if you're reading the names, Joyce is number 1, so we'll ask number 2 to get ready, and so on, and we'll read our names and honor those that are on this part of the memorial. Joyce?
First, the love of my life, James Michael Gentry, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Bobby T. Upton, U.S. Army, Tennessee. James W. Reed, United States Marine Corps, Tennessee. Lanny Ray Smith, United States Army, Tennessee. Henry T. Parks, United States Army, Tennessee. James Howard Lee, United States Marine Corps, Tennessee. Bruce Edward Nugent, United States Army, Tennessee. Dale James Metler, United States Marine Corps, Tennessee. William T. Moreland, United States Army, Tennessee. Larry Snyder, United States Navy, Tennessee. David J. Reed, United States Army, Tennessee. William Russell O'Lund, United States Army, Michigan. Virgil Ben Cooksey, United States Army, Tennessee. John Baggett, United States Army, Tennessee. Randall Hines, United States Army, Michigan. Terry James Rumpf, United States Army, Georgia. Roger D. Pullen, United States Army, Tennessee. Richard E. Lee, United States Army, Tennessee. Jerry L. Scarborough, United States Navy, Tennessee. Michael L. Vandenenad, United States Army, Ohio. Wayne Paul Fleener, United States Army, Virginia. David Peterson, United States Air Force, Tennessee. Michael Miscavige, United States Army, Pennsylvania. Albert D. LaFair, United States Navy, Massachusetts. Harold Lewis Kemp, United States Army, Tennessee. Doug Quick, United States Army, Tennessee. Joseph R. Boggs, United States Air Force, Alabama. Jesse Wayne Fuquay, United States Army, Tennessee. Ken Gamble, United States Navy, Tennessee. Andrew Allen, United States Navy, Tennessee. Don Eden, United States Army, Tennessee. Peter Michael Porter, United States Army, Tennessee. Lowell D. Cornelius, United States Army, Tennessee. Jackie Shanninger, United States Army, Tennessee. Van Mobley, United States Army, Georgia. Bill Rotet, United States Navy, Tennessee. Douglas C. Kastner, United States Army, Wisconsin. Scott Lieberger, United States Army, Tennessee. Thomas A. Spada, United States Army, Illinois. Michael David Tracy, United States Air Force, Tennessee. John D. DeCilio, United States Air Force, Illinois. David Elmer Nelson, United States Army, Washington. Charles A. Patton, United States Army, South Carolina. Stephen J. Pollan, United States Army, Arizona. Charles J. Falowski, United States Army, Wisconsin. Mike Miller, United States Navy, Tennessee. Steve Bingston, United States Army, Illinois. Lawrence Ed Bartow, United States Army, Ohio. James Eugene Dunman, United States Army, Tennessee. Jerry A. Stanfield, United States Army, Texas. Robert D. Nash, Jr., United States Navy, Tennessee. Richard L. Lee, United States Navy, New Jersey. Edward E. Thompson, United States Army, North Carolina. John E. Pullen, United States Marine Corps, Maine. Edward Tommy Evans, United States Marine Corps, Missouri. R. Michael Kidder, United States Navy, New York.
In honor of my dad, Arthur Randall Cady, U.S. Marine Corps, South Carolina. Lloyd Hummel, U.S. Army, Ohio. John Chambers, U.S. Navy, Georgia. Larry Richardson, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Thomas Hertz, U.S. Air Force, Georgia. McKinley Smart, U.S. Army, Illinois. Gary H. Hackworth, U.S. Air Force, Virginia. Joe Equinones, U.S. Army, Texas. Donald H. Hastings, U.S. Air Force, Maine. Stephen K. Price, U.S. Air Force, Indiana. Bienvenido Hessel, U.S. Air Force, New York. Bill Landbauer, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Lloyd A. Hansen, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. Oscar Rogers, U.S. Army, Texas. Paul Owens, U.S. Army, California. William Garrell, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Richard Wagner, U.S. Army, Maine. Rocky Wayne Cheney, U.S. Army, Louisiana. Reuben C. Perry III, U.S. Navy, Maine. Joe L. Eden, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Sam G. Smith, U.S. Army, Tennessee. David S. Head, U.S. Navy, Tennessee. Manny M. Lima, U.S. Army, Virginia. Neil Hooper, U.S. Army, Tennessee. William L. Allen, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Daniel Dan Taylor, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Rob Buzzard Elliott, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Frank G. Emerson, U.S. Marine Corps, Maryland. Chester O. Birdwell, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Yes, thank you, sir. David E. Barnes, Jr., U.S. Marine Corps, North Carolina. James Szymanski, U.S. Army, Nebraska. Jesse Wayne King, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Danny Clay Riley, U.S. Coast Guard, Tennessee. Herbert L. W. Anderson, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. Russell Lee Biggs, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Dennis W. Greek, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Mark Wayne Duger, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Gary R. Kirkpatrick, U.S. Army, Tennessee. John Richard Baker, U.S. Navy, Tennessee. John Wayne Searcy, U.S. Army, Kentucky. Dean R. McLean, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Harold D. Henry, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Albert Allen Dale, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. John David Lotz, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Willie Ryan, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Clifford Earl Cox, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Paul E. Kroenig, U.S. Air Force, Texas. George W. Bakash, U.S. Army, Florida. Billy Ray Ward, U.S. Army, Mississippi. Philip M. Harbin, U.S. Marine Corps, Ohio. Walter Smith, U.S. Navy, Minnesota. George N. Kemetz, Sr., U.S. Army, Texas. James A. Barjul, U.S. Air Force, South Carolina. Vernon Black, U.S. Army, Kentucky. Roy David Furman, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Arthur R. Hinton, U.S. Navy, Indiana. Carl R. Wilson, U.S. Army, Illinois. Michael E. Hertz, U.S. Army, Virginia. Terry Carrion, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. Gary D. Bryant, U.S. Air Force, Missouri. And James Dale Kennemer, U.S. Army, Texas.
Harold Summers, United States Air Force, Tennessee. Leroy Blackwell, United States Navy, Oklahoma. Gerald Baird, U.S. Army, Oklahoma. Joseph Guerrero, U.S. Navy, Florida. Donald Townsend, U.S. Marine Corps, Oklahoma. Valentino Cruz, United States Army, Arizona. Glenn Ashmore, U.S. Army, Nebraska. William Peacock, U.S. Army, Ohio. Ransom Carlisle, United States Marine Corps, Tennessee. Bobby Agee, United States Army, Tennessee. James Snow, U.S. Navy, Alabama. Michael Straw, U.S. Marine Corps, New York. Robert Kettleban, U.S. Navy, South Carolina. Don Reed, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Leland Amos, U.S. Navy, Georgia. Stanley Marla, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Larry Haywood, U.S. Navy, Tennessee. Andy Womack, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Danny Anderson, U.S. Navy, Wisconsin. Reverend Michael O'Brien, U.S. Army, Tennessee. John Fergus Jr., U.S. Army, Tennessee. James Clark, U.S. Navy, Georgia. Robert Story, U.S. Army, Tennessee. John West, U.S. Marine Corps, New York. James Lee, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Daniel Wine, U.S. Air Force, Georgia. Danny Biggs, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Charles Nelson, U.S. Navy, Florida. James Foster, U.S. Army, Illinois. Jerry Searcy, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Larry Barwick, U.S. Army, Colorado. Thomas Atkins, U.S. Army, Nebraska. Dale England, U.S. Army, Alabama. Salvador Rodriguez, U.S. Navy, Texas. David LaRose, U.S. Army, Texas. Clayton Hall, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Virgil Spicer, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Edward Plunkett, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Gerald Wright, U.S. Army, Connecticut. Tommy Herrera, U.S. Army, Texas. Terry Griffith, U.S. Navy, Kansas. Joseph Beach, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Kenneth Webb, U.S. Army, California. Kenneth Kingdom, Jr., U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Jack Silvers, U.S. Army, Ohio.
of the reasons that we give you these names is to make sure that we honor them properly, and to also let you understand that this is worldwide. We're here from all different states, and keep in mind, some of their loved ones may be here. These are not in alphabetical order. They're on the order that they were received and put on the cenotaph. So we ask you to please indulge us and be very respectful, because somebody sitting next to you might be listening for their loved one's name. Donald Friels Sr., U.S. Army, Indiana. Robert Meck Jr., U.S. Army, Tennessee. Peter David Andres, U.S. Army, New York. Dominic G. Blavich, U.S. Marine Corps, Pennsylvania. Ronald Harry Garrison, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. Harold Keith Smith, United States Marine Corps, Tennessee. Roy Walker, United States Army, Tennessee. Richard Borgen, U.S. Army, New Jersey. James O. Alford, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Gary E. Bergfield, United States Marine Corps, Indiana. William L. Hare Jr., United States Army, Alabama. Dean E. Calkins, United States Army, Iowa. Jerry A. Seagraves, U.S. Air Force, South Carolina. Frank Charles Kraft. Hang on. Frank Charles Kraft, U.S. Army, Missouri. Michael D. Anderson, United States Army, Kansas. Wesley J. Wainwright Jr., United States Marine Corps, Illinois. Chase Hensteller Sr., United States Marine Corps, Ohio. Barry Allen Gallus, United States Army, Wisconsin. Bradley Hermison, United States Army, Missouri. Stephen W. Kleinert, United States Army, Tennessee. William J. Burnett, United States Army, Tennessee. Jerry W. York, U.S. Navy, Tennessee. Kent R. Smith, U.S. Air Force, Indiana. Joseph N. Klein, U.S. Army, Illinois. Francis J. Morin, U.S. Army, Maine. Gary Whitley, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Merlin G. Crippen, U.S. Army, Kentucky. Dennis Kidwell, U.S. Army, Missouri. Thomas Jasinski, U.S. Marine Corps, Florida. Roger L. Booth, USA, USN, USAF, Illinois. Thomas F. Krieger, Sr., United States Army, Minnesota. Sheldon R. Green, United States Army, Wisconsin. Robert F. Ryer, U.S. Navy, South Carolina. Darrell K. Flint, U.S. Marine Corps, Minnesota. Calvin W. Klaus, U.S. Army, New Hampshire. Tommy E. Finney, U.S. Army, Indiana. Louis Mierzinski, U.S. Army, Massachusetts. Wayne Corliss, U.S. Marine Corps, California. William A. Gatcomb, United States Air Force, New Hampshire. John Elon Williams, U.S. Air Force, Washington, D.C. Robert Wazinski, U.S. Army, Ohio. James R. Porter, U.S. Navy, Florida. Ronald James Moell, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Larry L. Zink, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Rudolfo V. Schatz, U.S. Army, Delaware. Dennis Lauderville, U.S. Army, Iowa. William H. Lee, U.S. Army, Arkansas. James Lloyd Lutz, U.S. Army, Pennsylvania. Jerry L. Cobert, U.S. Navy, Missouri. David A. Holman, U.S. Army, Michigan. William B. Locke, U.S. Army, California. Donald L. Cooper, U.S. Navy, Missouri. Robert F. Cusack, U.S. Navy, Pennsylvania. James R. Edmondson, U.S. Army, Georgia. Billy Ray Bracey, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. Boyd W. Bandy, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Arthur A. Coates, U.S. Army, Tennessee. James Smart, U.S. Army, Illinois. Daniel Gilmore, U.S. Marine Corps, South Carolina. Harry M. Maury, Jr., U.S. Army, West Virginia.
Donald A. Donald A. Walsh, U.S. Air Force, Michigan. William H. Southworth, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Mitchell Frank Ward, U.S. Navy, South Carolina. David B. Parker, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Richard E. Copenhagen, U.S. Air Force, Pennsylvania. John P. Nasaskis, U.S. Air Force, Illinois. Richard Bellamy, Jr., U.S. Marine, South Carolina. Maurice Began, U.S. Army, Pennsylvania. Austin Ray Fisk, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Victor Pope, U.S. Navy, Tennessee. David Riley, U.S. Coast Guard, Tennessee. Stanley Fernandez, U.S. Air Force, Hawaii. Norbert K. Enos, U.S. Army, Hawaii. Everett M. Bell, U.S. Army, Indiana. John P. Chestnut, U.S. Army, Indiana. Ron Wagner, U.S. Army, Illinois. Bobby Wayne Mitchell, U.S. Air Force, North Carolina. John Telesco, U.S. Army, Connecticut. Stephen R. Lewis, U.S. Army, Michigan. Lowell Thomas Yoick, U.S. Army, West Virginia. John A. O'Keefe, U.S. Army, Michigan. Clarence Copenhagen, U.S. Marines, Pennsylvania. John W. Williams, Sr., U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Jerry A. Poole, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Gary A. Matulis, U.S. Army, Connecticut. Marion W. Chestnuts, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Keith Ray Owens, U.S. Army, Missouri. William Ray Jackson, U.S. Navy, Kansas. Robert L. Fruchis, Jr., U.S. Army, Ohio. George F. Livingston, U.S. Army, South Carolina. John W. Young, Jr., U.S. Army, Texas. Michael H. Fuller, U.S. Air Force, Michigan. Gerald D. Brent, U.S. Army, Minnesota. Robert P. DeFazzo, U.S. Navy, Massachusetts. Jeffrey R. Fraker, U.S. Marine Corps, California. Melvin R. Goodwin, U.S. Army, Tennessee. John Homer Longford, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Eddie Dean Farrell, U.S. Marines, Kentucky. Edward E. Glass, U.S. Army, Michigan. Brent C.J. Wade, U.S. Army, Kansas. John Ray Pope, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Ferris Lee Poole, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Danny C. Evans Sr., U.S. Marine, New Mexico. Marvin A. Henry Tucker, U.S. Navy, Texas. John Lee Taylor, U.S. Army, Kentucky. Michael D. Harris, Jr., U.S. Army, North Carolina. Don D. Bell III, U.S. Army, Colorado. Harris William D., U.S. Army, Texas. James Dean Jones, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Walter Wittenberg, U.S. Army, Tennessee. John Benzer, U.S. Air Force, Michigan. Rexall Hall, U.S. Army, Michigan. Hughes L. Turbert, Jr., U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Thomas S. McBride, U.S. Army, Connecticut. Leon Lenny, U.S. Army, Indiana. Michael Tucker, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Billy D. Snyder, U.S. Army, Indiana. Bruce Edward Norrin, U.S. Marine Corps, New York. John E. Kidd, U.S. Army, Ohio. Stephen Allen Rose, Sr., U.S. Army, Tennessee.
the last one standing over here. They've been doing one back.
Gary Chennett, U.S. Army, Michigan. Buddy R. Bradley, U.S. Marine Corps, New Mexico. Johnny Brooks, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Jimmy L. Moreno, U.S. Army, Texas. Richard L. Moreno, U.S. Marine Corps, Texas. Willie L. Moreno, U.S. Marine Corps, Texas. Oscar W. Metcalf, Jr., U.S. Navy, Tennessee. Furman Brown Keith, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Donald Ray Veach, U.S. Marine Corps, Indiana. Ben L. Raymer, U.S. Army, Tennessee. John Harmon Hill, U.S. Navy, Louisiana. George Y. Rhodes, U.S. Navy, Pennsylvania. George O'Hara, U.S. Army, Florida. Harold Watts, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Daniel P. Vigliotti, U.S. Air Force, Colorado. Joe L. Heatherly, U.S. Army, Missouri. William R. White III, U.S. Marine Corps, Delaware. Robert W. Noonan, U.S. Army, Ohio. Raymond R. Nelson, U.S. Navy, Nebraska. John Griffith, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. Bobby Hudgens, U.S. Navy, Tennessee. Neil E. Nauer, U.S. Navy, Illinois. Glenn F. Herzl, U.S. Army, Nebraska. Douglas D. Engel, U.S. Marine Corps, Illinois. William Crawford, U.S. Marine Corps, Virginia. James D. Black, U.S. Air Force, California. John D. Bailey, Sr., U.S. Marine Corps, Ohio. Billy Joe Armour, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Joseph C. Spence, U.S. Army, North Carolina. John L. Caldwell, U.S. Marine Corps, Georgia. A.J. Sword, U.S. Marine Corps, Georgia. Jim Harding, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. William B. Wright, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Thomas R. Hanson, U.S. Army, Utah. Larry D. Farrow, U.S. Army, Texas. William S. Stewart, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Evan R. Edwards, U.S. Army, Ohio. James Hampton, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. James V. Sprouse, Jr., U.S. Army, Tennessee. Alan D. Danley, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Jimmy Gray Smith, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Dominique J. DeMare, Jr., U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Thomas E. Austin, Jr., U.S. Navy, Tennessee. Leo P. Allen, U.S. Army, Michigan. Albert Bilyeu, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Leroy J. Jerome, U.S. Army, Texas. Jack Gallagher, U.S. Navy, New Jersey. Stephen P. Simonton, U.S. Marine Corps, Florida. John S. Coulombe, U.S. Air Force, Rhode Island.
Harold D. Michoud, U.S. Air Force, South Carolina. Ronald Harding, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Wayne Davis, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Jimmy A. Johnson, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Frederick W. Gray, U.S. Marine Corps, Virginia. Terry Lee Walker, U.S. Army, Tennessee. John B. Yanni, U.S. Navy, South Carolina. Jonathan Thorburn, U.S. Navy, South Dakota. Michael R. Madigan, U.S. Marine Corps, Indiana. Charles Eugene Key, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Harry E. Simpson, U.S. Navy, Iowa.
In honor of my brother-in-law, Ronald L. Pope, U.S. Navy, Oregon. Alan R. Hobart, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. Ralph C. Shirey, U.S. Army, Virginia. Leonard M. Law, U.S. Marine Corps, New Jersey. James M. Herney, U.S. Air Force, Maryland. Robert F. Cusack, U.S. Navy, Pennsylvania. Kenneth H. Vaughn, U.S. Army, Pennsylvania. David H. Wood, U.S. Navy, Tennessee. William Hodson, U.S. Air Force, Illinois. Bobby Jean Lassiter, U.S. Army, Missouri. Roger Hannebarger, U.S. Army, Illinois. Peter M. Sherbrooke, U.S. Navy, Illinois. James Clyde McGuire, U.S. Marine Corps, West Virginia. Carl G. Lassiter, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Larry E. Hardison, U.S. Air Force, Missouri. Mark J. Hupke, U.S. Air Force, Ohio. Glenn E. Spencer, U.S. Army, Utah. Frank L. Newton, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Edward J. Beauchamp, U.S. Army, Wisconsin. Neil F. Sharp, Jr., U.S. Marine Corps, Michigan. Charles M. Tinnon, Jr., U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. William F. Hill, U.S. Army, Kentucky. Stephen Barrell, U.S. Marine Corps, Texas. Thomas R. Kachala, U.S. Marine Corps, New Jersey. Carl Kuzik, U.S. Army, Michigan. Robert E. Hartman, U.S. Army, Illinois. Frederick Lambert, Jr., U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Morton E. Haley, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Robert C. Stevenson, U.S. Air Force, Wisconsin. Ronnie J. Melton, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Billy Dean Griffith, U.S. Navy, Kansas. Charles B. Hall, U.S. Navy, Tennessee. John Kotick, U.S. Navy, Pennsylvania. James E. Parrish, U.S. Army, Illinois. Peter B. Henderson, U.S. Army, Michigan. Jerry Dale Atkins, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Edward A. Dean, U.S. Air Force, Pennsylvania. Robert Dale Rogers, U.S. Navy, California. William R. DeBerry, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Stephen M. Silliman, U.S. Marine Corps, Kentucky. James A. Caldone, U.S. Navy, Massachusetts. Bernard J. Dunn, Jr., U.S. Marine Corps, Virginia. Roger M. Glass, Sr., U.S. Army, Tennessee. Ray Wyatt Beard, U.S. Navy, North Carolina. Luther Gale Baker, U.S. Navy, Oklahoma. Gary R. Grahn, Sr., U.S. Navy, North Carolina. David C. Bassett, U.S. Marine Corps, Connecticut. Charles McFarland, U.S. Navy, California. Hal Evitz, U.S. Army, Tennessee. J. Ronnie Holman, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Charles Eddie Ward, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Tommy E. Walker, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. John R. Baker, U.S. Navy, Tennessee. Kenneth E. Tarbucks, U.S. Air Force, Massachusetts. Gilbert W. Tarbucks, U.S. Army, Massachusetts. Joseph M. Hunt, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Charles Hanson, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Patrick P. Pewitt, U.S. Army, Louisiana. Robert J. Brooks, U.S. Air Force, Wyoming.
Larry E. Stroop, U.S. Navy, Tennessee. Edward D. Nicholson, U.S. Navy, Tennessee. Craig W. Harridge, Sr., U.S. Army, Illinois. Kenneth N. Lowe, Sr., U.S. Air Force, North Carolina. James Graham, Jr., U.S. Army, South Carolina. William L. Bennington, Jr., U.S. Marine Corps, Florida. James T. Hughes, III, U.S. Army, Illinois. Marion Barksdale, U.S. Army, Arizona. James A. Dillon, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. Jimmy R. Grogan, U.S. Navy, Tennessee. Danny E. Johnson, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Henry Bosca, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. Ernest S. Mitchell, U.S. Army, Tennessee. James D. Blank, U.S. Air Force, California. Charles S. Breeding, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Ronnie R.D. Doris, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. James Leon Johns, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Richard W. Lurch, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Richard P. Belcher, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. James Kopinski, U.S. Army, Ohio. Ronald K. Markham, U.S. Navy, Indiana. Billy E. Jameson, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Joseph Kiravalli, U.S. Air Force, New York. John Francis Dushko, U.S. Army, New York. Garland Bullock III, U.S. Marine Corps, Virginia. Chester F. Harrison, U.S. Navy, North Carolina. David A. Rogers, U.S. Air Force, North Carolina. Donald Beeman, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Thomas E. Rogers, U.S. Air Force, North Carolina. David Wesley Page, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Dwayne G. Warner, U.S. Army, Indiana. Herman F. Williams, Jr., U.S. Marine Corps, South Carolina. Ricky Palmer, U.S. Navy, Illinois. James A. Lemon, U.S. Navy, Washington. Michael J. Stanko, U.S. Marine Corps, Ohio. Arnold E. Stanko, U.S. Marine Corps, Ohio. David S. E. Taylor, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Tony Lee James, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Bernard E. Sibley, U.S. Army, New York. Ryland Cromwell, Sr., U.S. Air Force, New York. Edward E. Byrd, Jr., U.S. Army, Alabama. Donnie M. Towning, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Joseph M. Laddish, U.S. Army, Kansas. Gene Eschliman, U.S. Navy, Wisconsin. Joseph T. Lampkin, U.S. Army, Kentucky. Gary L. Weatherford, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. Ronald L. Willman, U.S. Army, Kentucky. Jerry H. Wright, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Dennis G. McGuire, U.S. Army, Pennsylvania. Charles Audette III, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Leonard G. Whitaker, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Arnold J. Slagle, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Thomas R. Young, U.S. Army, Maine. Frank W. Hutton, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Philip E. McMahon, U.S. Army, Alabama. James E. Meyer, U.S. Air Force, New York. John F. Manetta, U.S. Navy, Massachusetts. Arthur Robinson Sr., U.S. Air Force, North Carolina. Arlie W. Horan, U.S. Army, North Carolina. David R. Osale, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Norman R. Moore, U.S. Air Force, Michigan.
My husband, Bobby Tyner, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Gail Peterson, U.S. Air Force, Wisconsin. Paul Terry Savoy, U.S. Army, Louisiana. Kenneth E. Parsons, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Robert D. Sauer, U.S. Army, Maryland. Bobby T. Manning, Sr., U.S. Army, North Carolina. Bobby M. Lassiter, U.S. Air Force, North Carolina. Wendell White, U.S. Air Force, California. Erwin Spitz, U.S. Army, California. Roland E. Harpin, U.S. Army, Rhode Island. Charles M. Esselin, Sr., U.S. Air Force, New York. W. Marvin Davis, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Richard R. Garrett, U.S. Army, Virginia. Johnny E. L. Britton, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Bryson L. Allen, U.S. Marine Corps, Kansas. Conrad E. Shep, U.S. Air Force, Wisconsin. Eddie L. Lunsford, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Ronald C. Jordan, U.S. Army, South Carolina. David N. Field, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Ray Mayo, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Ray Mayo, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Gary W. Hedges, U.S. Army, Ohio. Herman F. Hemby, Sr., U.S. Army, North Carolina. Ronald Brown, U.S. Army, Georgia. Frank J. Miosi, U.S. Marine Corps, New York. Timothy C. Bilbray, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Howard Gene Overton, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Bernard H. Troutman, U.S. Army, Pennsylvania. Nick M. Harrelson, U.S. Navy, Texas. L.G. Clayton II, U.S. Army, Texas. Alan E. Moser, U.S. Army, West Virginia. Lawrence Gibson, U.S. Air Force, North Carolina. E. Frank Smith, Jr., U.S. Army, Tennessee. James H. Smith II, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Amin Hassan, U.S. Marine Corps, South Carolina. Guy Andrew Whaley, U.S. Air Force, North Carolina. John William Swink, U.S. Marine Corps, North Carolina. Edward Thomas Avery, U.S. Navy, North Carolina. Woodrow J. Gilbert, U.S. Army, Mississippi. George S. Viner, Jr., U.S. Marine Corps, North Carolina. Thomas James Owen, U.S. Army, Oregon. Arthur Randolph Cady, U.S. Marine Corps, South Carolina. Jimmy R. Eubanks, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Quince M. Watson, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Philip P. Eccles, U.S. Marine Corps, South Carolina. Floyd M. Leaf, Sr., U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. Kermit G. Flanagan, U.S. Marine Corps, Michigan. Carl L. Greenwood, U.S. Army, New Hampshire. James Curtis Days, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Lloyd R. Williamson, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Edward E. Hornby, U.S. Army, Arizona. Carlos McFarland, U.S. Navy, California. Gary Chestnut, U.S. Marine Corps, Michigan. Carl C. Chestnut, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Ronald Devlin, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Rocky L. Stuck, U.S. Army, New York. James R. Spivey, U.S. Army, Tennessee. John E. Wright, U.S. Army, New York. Carl W. Sorens, U.S. Navy, Missouri. John W. Irwin, U.S. Army, Louisiana. James Tretton, U.S. Army, Ohio. James Langer, U.S. Army, Wisconsin.
J.D. Roberts, U.S. Army, Wisconsin. Earl C. Hoffman, Sr., U.S. Army, Pennsylvania. John David Seltzer, U.S. Navy, South Carolina. Johnny H. Preacher, U.S. Army, South Carolina. John William Koch, Sr., U.S. Navy, Colorado. Robert R. Terry, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Tommy Gorse, U.S. Air Force, South Carolina. Robert A. Lynn, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Raymond Lyons Jr., U.S. Army, Alaska. Roddy F. Lewis, U.S. Air Force, South Carolina. James Thomas Jr., U.S. Army, South Carolina. Marvin Sabelo, U.S. Air Force, New Jersey. Richard J. Miller, U.S. Navy, New York. Robert D. Johnson, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Charles B. Squares, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Michael J. Kerper, U.S. Air Force, Pennsylvania. Ronald M. Granger, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Nelson L. Livingston, U.S. Air Force, South Carolina. Sam C. McDowell, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Stephen W. Brown, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Gilbert B. Guerrero, U.S. Army, Texas. Elbert V. Elmore, U.S. Army, Alabama. DeBoy Sappington, U.S. Army, Tennessee. George R. K., U.S. Navy, South Carolina. Lewis Livingston, Sr., U.S. Army, South Carolina. James A. Breen, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Johnny H. Stanley, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Bobby G. Scott, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. James L. Smith, U.S. Marine Corps, North Carolina. Hardy L. Nick Rose, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Robert E. Lewis, U.S. Navy, North Carolina. James B. Snow, U.S. Army, Illinois. Harvey L. Burton, U.S. Army, South Carolina. James E. Rich Creek, U.S. Army, Indiana. Robert Gardner, U.S. Army, Tennessee. James Melvin Cripps, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Richard C. Brown, U.S. Air Force, Texas. William Godwin, U.S. Navy, Texas. John F. Sorensen, U.S. Air Force, Iowa. Charles Sandon Bush, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Ronald M. Rowe, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Richard Bateman II, U.S. Army, Arkansas. Alan Cohen, Air Force, Colorado. Patrick D. Burt, U.S. Army, Louisiana. Paul Zunderman, U.S. Marine Corps, New York. Robert J. Ward, U.S. Army, Illinois. Kenneth I. Kearns, U.S. Navy, Pennsylvania. Gene M. Gray, U.S. Marine Corps, Idaho. Kershaw Warner, U.S. Navy, California. Thomas J. Holler, U.S. Army, Georgia. Oni Ray Ferris, U.S. Navy, Louisiana. Lester Gordon Hodge, Hager, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Luke Bellamy Jr., U.S. Army, South Carolina. Samuel Lee Bryant, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Frank G. Merchek, U.S. Navy, North Carolina. Terry T. Earl, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Robert L. Becker, U.S. Army, Nebraska. Robert L. Defendor, U.S. Army, Illinois. Patrick Knoll, U.S. Marine Corps, Ohio. Dana C. Helm, U.S. Marine Corps, Pennsylvania. Stephen W. Green, U.S. Marine Corps, New York.
Carter Corky Howard, United States Army, Tennessee. Larry S. L. Learskov, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Henry F. Hurley, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Charles F. Schill, U.S. Army, Michigan. Ronald L. Abel, U.S. Navy, Illinois. Dennis W. Robinson, U.S. Army, Indiana. Ed Thomason, Jr., U.S. Army, Idaho. L.A. Creekmore, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Thomas John Bubar, U.S. Army, New York. John A. T-Rat Bain, U.S. Army, Wyoming. Donald Eddie Tyler, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Philip A. Fournier, U.S. Navy, Massachusetts. George M. Markham, U.S. Army, Alabama. James Gordon, Jr., U.S. Army, Florida. Wilburn H. Beal, U.S. Army, Tennessee. George Haberjack, Jr., U.S. Navy, Pennsylvania. Detlef Roos, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Milton Lewis Gore, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Robert G. Kleiner, U.S. Coast Guard, Tennessee. Wilbur L. Small, U.S. Marine Corps, South Carolina. Frederick Perez, U.S. Army, Iowa. Larry D. Hara, U.S. Army, Virginia. Douglas N. Foster, U.S. Army, Kentucky. Robert R. White, U.S. Army, Pennsylvania. Charles Dale Farmer, U.S. Army, Georgia. John M. Bubanko, Jr., U.S. Navy, Pennsylvania. Ernest L. Wilson, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Walter E. Martin, U.S. Navy, Tennessee. Carlton L. McLemore, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Lee Hubbard, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Norman G. Caudill, U.S. Army, Virginia. Donald Allen Moberg, U.S. Navy, Minnesota. Manning A. Brown, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Robert A. Seneseth, U.S. Navy, California. James Dieters, U.S. Marine Corps, Indiana. Larry M. Crabtree, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Ralph Herman Pike, U.S. Marine Corps, North Carolina. Michael A. Avila, U.S. Navy, California. David Chacon, U.S. Army, California. James M. Statler, U.S. Army, Maryland. William M. Morrell, Jr., U.S. Marine Corps, Maine. Anthony Chacon, U.S. Army, California. Curtis Wayne Thomas, U.S. Navy, Tennessee. Philip L. Rogers, U.S. Marine Corps, Arizona. Harry J. Marker, Sr., U.S. Navy, Delaware. Henry A. Johnson, U.S. Army, South Carolina. James R. Euler, U.S. Navy, New York. Patrick Muir, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Daniel N. Domingo, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Sanford Adelet, Jr., U.S. Navy, Tennessee. Anthony J. Tangi, U.S. Army, Ohio. Richard A. Griffith, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Barry M. L. Meade, U.S. Army, Florida. Danny E. Kinsley, U.S. Army, Nebraska. Henry A. Bloxham, Jr., U.S. Army, Mississippi. Charles E. Davis, United States Marine Corps, Illinois. John Provenzano, Jr., U.S. Army, South Carolina. Robert C. Frazier, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. James E. Cox, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Joseph E. Knowles, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee.
These last 38 names that will be read are going to go on cenotaph number 12. If you notice, there are only 11 cenotaphs that are complete. We have 38 names, and as we always do, we will honor every name that has been submitted. Michael D. Morgan, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Jamie A. Liras, U.S. Air Force, South Carolina. Jeffrey S. Hutchison, U.S. Army, Georgia. Anthony Payeto, U.S. Marine Corps, Pennsylvania. William Liam Kelly, U.S. Marine Corps, Pennsylvania. Francis S. Kelly, U.S. Marine Corps, Pennsylvania. William H. Abbott, U.S. Army, Arizona. W. James Ferguson, U.S. Marine Corps, Tennessee. Larry Bonds, U.S. Army, Illinois. Richard Earl Simons, U.S. Army, Illinois. J. W. Manning, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Miklashaw Lysko, U.S. Army, Michigan. Thomas V. Freeholtz, U.S. Army, California. Royce Dean Woodruff, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Michael J. Schmidt, U.S. Army, Texas. Clifford E. Adams, U.S. Army, California. Troy B. Owsley, U.S. Army, Indiana. Robert Turner, U.S. Air Force, Michigan. Richard D. Meyer, U.S. Air Force, New York. David L. Davis, U.S. Army, Tennessee. Wayne L. Christensen, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Donald R. Barnes, U.S. Air Force, Tennessee. Robert Edward Cutting, U.S. Army, Maryland. Michael Martin Sr., U.S. Air Force, Kansas. Randall Pond, U.S. Army, Utah. Robert J. Bolt, U.S. Navy, Illinois. Carl James Dewey Sr., U.S. Army, North Carolina. Stephen J. Warren, U.S. Army, California. Joseph D. Marcella, U.S. Army, Minnesota. Robert E. Johnson, U.S. Army, North Carolina. Our only female Vietnam veteran that is going to be added to the memorial. Sarah Johns, WAC, Women's Army Corps, Tennessee. Jim Otterberg, U.S. Marine Corps, New Jersey. David R. Bush, U.S. Army, South Carolina. James G. Blackstock, U.S. Navy, Texas. James G. Blackstock, U.S. Army, South Carolina. Ruben Carrasco, U.S. Navy, Texas. James L. Bowman, U.S. Army, Alabama. Ruben Munig Gago, U.S. Army, Puerto Rico. John R. Rocher, U.S. Army, South Carolina.
There's one song the soldier knows. It's the one with only 24 notes. Might mean you've reached your journey's end. See you on the other side, my friend. They play it at the unknown soldier's tomb, and for most they play it all too soon. From the ones you swore to protect, they'll be paying you their last respects. Sound the guns, 21. Welcome home, your work is done. They'll fold the flag and give it to your next of kin. They'll bow their heads, say a few words, give a send-off you deserve. Let the bugle play that song once again. You know you'll make your mama proud. Oh, if your daddy could see you now, you'll do more than fill his shoes. You're gonna make the local front page news. So sound the guns, 21. Welcome home, your work is done. But fold the flag and give it to your next of kin. But bow their heads, say a few words, give a send-off you deserve. Let the bugle play that song once again. Sound the guns, 21. Welcome home, your work is done. They'll place 3 shells inside a flag and tuck them in. They'll bow their heads, say a few words, give a send-off you deserve. Let the bugle play that song once again.
Ladies and gentlemen, our founder, Ken Campbell.
I don't know that I can follow that song, but there's one thing that I want you all to understand. And the names that were read today is not even 1/10 of 1% of the veterans suffering from Agent Orange. There's so many that come home and did not realize that they had been wounded. And nobody talks about it unless you're a veteran. The public doesn't know what kind of sacrifices we have made. They don't, and the spouses have to sit there day in and day out and watch their loved ones suffer from this awful dioxin, the poison, one of the worst poisons that as men have ever known. Now, our government might have thought that they were doing us a favor by killing all the vegetation. But it's just like everything else the government does. They don't foresee anything. They just, on the moment's notice, they do what they do. They don't look to the future of what they've done. It's just appalling to me that they will not recognize us as being wounded by Agent Orange while we were in service of our country in Vietnam. Sure, they give us compensation through the VA. They do this and they do that, but that's just a pittance. I think every Vietnam veteran out here would give up that what they get if they were just recognized for what it is. It's just amazing to me that our government is doing us the way they're doing us. They will not recognize us. We've got a bill in the Armed Service Committee that was put there by Van Drew, a congressman in New Jersey. It's been sitting in the Armed Service Committee since August of 1921 or 2021, and it hasn't come out of committee. I have called every senator, congressman on that committee, along with every one of our board members. I've called them day in and day out, had no results, none whatsoever. They won't bring it out. They don't want the public to know, and that's just appalling to me. I just can't see it. Like I said, the names that was read today is not even 1%. It's like maybe a tenth of 1% of the guys out here suffering from this. We cannot get any national recognition. It's just I don't know why, but every time we try, we get shot down. We just it's just not that important to them. Even though they will end up at the end, they have killed 2,600,000 of us. Since we started this, and the names that were read, some of them had passed, and their spouses put their names on the memorial. A lot of them still with us today, and a lot of them have passed since their name has gone on this memorial. I just don't know what to say, guys. I'm just lost for words. I love it that you guys showed up. I love each and every one of you, and it's just I appreciate your support so much. It's just I just don't know what to say. I love each and every one of you, and I hope that you love us too. At the end of this ceremony, I want our board members, since they come in from out of state and what have you, to meet down at the funeral home, and let's have a board meeting. We've got a lot to discuss. We've had a lot going on, and we finally went from an independent 501c3 to a public 501c3, which means that we can now apply for grants, which will help us a tremendous amount, buying these medals and getting them out at no charge to these warriors. And if any of you that were in Vietnam, whether you have a condition of Agent Orange or not, if you made it home, you're eligible to get your name on this memorial. And we want to fill this memorial up. We want to go all the way around this memorial with pedestals with more cenotaphs on it. We want to get as many names out here as we can, because every name on there will never be forgotten, because this memorial is going to be here for years and years and years, generation from generation to generation. And we may not know it, but somewhere down the line, our great-grandson or our great-granddaughter may come up here and say, hey, that was my great-grandpa. He served in the Vietnam War. We're not going to be forgotten, guys, not as long as your name is on this memorial. Again, I want to thank all of the speakers. There's too many people here that support our foundation that I can't mention them all. So I'll just say, everybody that participated, thank you very much. And that includes you in the audience, your participation. I love you guys. And God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, brother. Everybody, please stand for the gun salute. We've got the rifle salute coming up. Remain standing for taps. And for the benediction, we've got Lash Braden, or we've got the Robertson County Honor Guard presenting the rifle salute. Lash Braden will present taps, and then Joe Eden the benediction, and then you will be adjourned. Please stand.
Thank you all for attending today. God, you are our awesome God. We love you, and we just praise your holy name. And Lord, I would ask that you would watch over everyone that's going back to their home, keep them safe, keep us all safe, Lord. And we thank you. We thank you for everything that you've done for us. We thank you for the Orange Heart Medal Foundation and what they're doing and what they continue to do. Lord, we love you. And we say all of this in your Son's name, in Jesus' name. Amen.